I think your top line advice would be to make sure that you understand where you want to take the business, and that is understood and agreed and aligned with the other agency owners, so that everyone is on the same page, going in the same direction towards the same goal.
This is Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, your go-to guide to solving your biggest marketing agency challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Alton, and each episode is an honest and frank look at what agencies go through, from turning clients to tackling tech and ideas that you can apply to your own business. And now, the rest of today's episode. Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, where each and every week we're talking to marketing agencies like you, going through many of the same struggles you're going through and sharing their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode inspiration, motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling agencies like yours. When an agency owner wants to make an important decision on behalf of the agency, such as what services to offer or even whether to sell the business, it's their decision to make. But if you have one or more partners, now you have to reach consensus. If you don't have alignment among all partners, coming to agreement on anything will be hard and potentially detrimental to the success of the agency and the partners themselves. How can you identify these kinds of issues before they arise? And if you're already in conflict with your partners, what should your next steps be? That's exactly what Karl Heasman is going to talk to us about. Karl spent 25 years in the agency business, successfully exited despite having partner challenges of his own, and has since gone on to coach and mentor dozens of other agency owners and partners going through similar situations. He works with ambitious digital marketing and communications agencies, typically between 500,000 and 5 million in revenue, to help them achieve their goals, whether that be helping them navigate through a rapid period of growth, kickstarting the business after flatlining for years, or preparing for a more successful exit. He's an invaluable partner to help other agency owners tackle their own growth challenges. Hey, Karl, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you, Mike. That's a great intro. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be here.
My pleasure. In fact, I always love when people appreciate the intro because I'm just reading what they've done. So that's all on you. But I appreciate the compliment. Can you start by sharing a little bit of your own experience, thinking back to when you were an agency owner and how that partnership with that co-founder or co-partner fared?
Yeah, well, where do I begin? I guess I begin when I decided that I needed a partner or a number two. I was 5 years into my agency journey. The business had got to a point where I couldn't really manage it myself. I had probably three sort of permalancer account handlers and maybe five freelance creatives. And I got to a point where I was running out of capacity and I needed to take on a full time member of staff, and decided that one option would be to bring in a number two. And I met somebody who I used to work with, who'd been a board director of a 150 person agency that I used to work with, and he just finished an MBA and was out of work whilst or looking for his next job. I had a freelance kind of opportunity to pitch for a beer brand, and he had the skills that I needed for that particular pitch. I reached out to him. We worked together on the pitch, and we won the pitch off a big 100-person agency. And suddenly thought, wow, this is I need to scale. And he had the right skills at the time to help me with that one particular client. So that was the inspiration for us getting together, and that was 5 years in. And yeah, the first year I thought was going to be just doubling the business, because he had a similar background to me. We're both from a client service account handling background, and I thought all I needed was another person like me to double the agency size. It transpired that the beer brand that we won a loyalty program from and an on-trade promotion campaign on, the loyalty program didn't actually materialize, and that was the reason why I brought him in the first place. So I didn't get the growth that I hoped for. But the first year, I think we kind of flatlined on the same income, so I started to think, is this the right idea? But then we started seeing the benefits, or I started seeing the benefits of having a number two who had complementary skills, and we started growing the business. We ended up properly organizing the business, having board meetings monthly, deciding where we were going to go, having a sort of a growth plan, and for the next 5 years, the business almost doubled every year for the 5 years. And it wasn't until the 10th anniversary then that I decided that I wanted to change, and that we started to have a few conflicts, and we were kind of misaligned on our final direction or destination.
So let's talk about that. Why is it that it's such a challenge, first of all, for a couple people to be working in the same business after many years? I mean, your story is a little bit unique. I imagine a lot of agency partners and co-owners, they're co-founders, right? They started that agency together. You brought somebody on as a partner halfway through. But why is it such a challenge to come up with that alignment? And why do you think that is? And more importantly, why is it so important to be in alignment?
Yeah. So why is what? Yeah, I mean, I guess the challenge for why is there no alignment? I guess is because you don't necessarily you have rose tinted glasses when you get together. You go through a honeymoon period because you see all the benefits and all the pros of getting together. But I guess you don't see or discuss the potential downside or problems or challenges until they come. So, and they may not come for I don't know 6 months, a year, 5 years, and yeah, I guess you don't prepare in advance for that alignment. That's something that happens by chance, I guess. That you think you discuss that where you're going with your partner, where the long distance, what the goals are, what the final destination is. You might do that by chance at the beginning of that relationship, or you might just get on and do the work, which I think tends to happen. You just jump in because it sounds like a great idea at the time without knowing where you're going, where that final destination is. And over time, of course, challenges come along, whether that's financial challenges, or you don't like the way they deal with staff members, or they deal with a client in a way that you wouldn't like them to deal with, or something along the line changes, and that's when you start to sort of think, yeah, are we misaligned? Where are we going? Do we need a marriage guidance counselor?
Right, right. So along those lines, I know that's not the only thing that you do to help agencies, but you've obviously spoken to a lot of agencies who've been going through these kinds of struggles. Can you share some examples what those actually look like? And I know a lot of listeners might be facing these challenges today, and others are in similar joint leadership positions, and they might benefit from some cautionary tales.
Yeah, okay. Let me think. I've had probably a handful of agencies that have had partner challenges. They are a little bit of a taboo subject sometimes. People don't tend to talk about them. It's a bit like having challenges with your marriage. You don't tend to talk about them openly with people. And I think the same applies to agencies. But of course, because I'm on the inner circle, mentoring the owners, managing their or chairing their board meetings, I can sense sometimes there's a conflict, or I can see it. It might be more open than just sensing it, or they might even tell me they've got a challenge, and can I help with it? One particular agency I can think of had three partners, and one of those partners was a lady who had two babies within 3 years, and we were going through a rapid growth phase at that point. We were preparing for an exit to a big network agency, and in the 4 years, I think, or 3.5 to 4 years I was working with them, one of the partners was absent on maternity leave for 18 months. And I think the other two partners started to build a bit of resentment, I think, for that, because they weren't there. She wasn't there to help, and they were doing, I guess, more work. So sometimes you get those challenges, and I think if it's not discussed openly, then that can lead to resentment. And I think that particular instance, I had to facilitate some conversations which enabled them to get through that challenging time. And fortunately, they stayed together as a threesome and did a successful exit to a network agency. Another agency I worked with, again, had three partners. One of them was clearly not aligned to the other two when I was in my meetings with them, and we decided to actually conduct some personality tests, and that really was enlightening, because when we saw the results, I could see why I sensed there was an issue between the three of them. Two of them were very much aligned, and the personality test suggests that they would get on well, and the other one was different and had a different approach, and I think that exercise allowed us all to be a bit more objective about their relationships and how they work together, and it kind of gave us an opportunity to discuss it in a way that took that sensitivity out of the mix and made it less personal, because of course these conversations can get very personal. People can get very upset. They can be very insulted that they think their character is being questioned. So in this case, we had the results of the personality test, and it became very clear that one of the partners was not going to see things in the same way the other two were, and I think that gave us the catalyst to have a conversation about whether or not they should stay together. And I was able to, in that instance, facilitate the one partner who wasn't in alignment, to exit the business, and I facilitated those conversations, and it led to three becoming more amicable way than if I wasn't around, let's say.
That's really powerful, I think, to be able to take an aspect of the partnership, such as personality, and detach it from the individual people and examine it like it's a problem to be solved or an opportunity to be leveraged, rather than, like you said, a personal character defect, right? It's not about me and who I am as a person. It's about, well, this is how I come across, this is how I lead, or how I exist as a partner, and how can we change or visualize or discuss that. I think that's really outstanding. Now, you've got some folks listening who maybe in these kinds of arrangements with their agency, they've got one or more partners, but they're not necessarily having any kind of conflict yet. Are there any warning signs that they should be mindful of that may be like, you know what, this is something that we might want to talk about today before it becomes a problem?
Yes, I think there are some warning signs, and also there are some things you should do at the outset as well before you even look for those signs. And in that case, I think you should have a shareholders agreement, which allows you to put a lot of this information down on paper at the beginning of the relationship. You can discuss how does one party leave if they want to leave. What is the mechanism for valuing their exit if they want to leave early? Those sorts of things are helpful. In my situation, I also put drag and tag rules on my shares, which is a legal term. I'm not sure if that applies in American law as well, but what it basically means in England is that if the majority shareholder sells their shares, the drag and tag rules apply, and it means that you drag the other shareholders into the sale. They can't stop you. So I think getting the shareholder agreement in place at the early part of that relationship is a useful exercise, because you just start to discuss what the exit is, what the end goal is. So you kind of start with the end in mind rather than just talking about how exciting this is to start with something. I really would advise you start thinking about where is this going to go? What does everyone's journey look like? Is there a destination that we're heading to, and do we all want to get off at this journey at the same time? I mean, you don't have to. That's the key. You need to be going in the same direction, but everyone doesn't have to get off the train at the same station. And I think that's really important to think about. But challenges over time that might create conflicts, I guess, warning signs are things like, I guess, the first time you lose a client, the first time you lose a staff member, they feel quite personal when you first lose them, and you start questioning, was it me, or was it them, or so I guess little things along the way those things will happen. And of course, as you get longer in your agency journey, those things become quite normal. So, but I think the first time they happen, that can rock you a little bit. Bigger things, life-changing things like having children can change the dynamics of the relationship. It might mean that one party isn't around as much, as less time. They need to go home earlier. They need to childmind. All those things could lead to a change of relationship, which could then lead to maybe one party or one partner feeling that they're adding more value than another. And I think that's key. That is a key trigger for resentment to build, because at the end of the day, every partner should feel that they're adding the appropriate value to whatever their shareholding is. Financial pressures is another one. I'm sure the last year or so has been testing a lot of relationships, particularly where perhaps the owners haven't been able to pay themselves enough to cover all of their expenses in a way that they would like, or sometimes you end up paying your staff more than yourselves because we as agency owners get paid last. So financial pressures can trigger conversations which can be difficult. Also, I think when you're in those situations, different people deal with stress in different ways, and sometimes it brings the best out of people. Sometimes it brings the worst out of people, and I think that can also bring out an awareness in the partners that actually this is something that they don't want to deal with, or a personality trait or a character trait they didn't realize the other partner had because of the stress, or maybe there's a potential nervous breakdown in the mix. These are all things that are very real at the moment, and I think that's where you probably do need to stop and reflect, and maybe get a third party opinion to sort of help facilitate conversations before they become toxic. And unfortunately, they can accelerate, and if they're not dealt with, that is a definite challenge.
I want to harken back to the analogy of a marriage that you mentioned earlier, because that is so true. While this is a business arrangement,
Mm,
we're also talking about relationships between two or more
mm,
individuals, and whether it's life events, business events, or what have you, those are going to have an impact on those. And along the same lines as that analogy, you talked about having this agreement up front, very similar to how a marriage might have a prenuptial agreement.
mm,
But similarly, I think most people, if they approach their spouse with the idea of a prenuptial agreement before they're about to be married, a lot of spouses may not be very warm to that idea. So, similarly, I think if I were to go to an agency partner that I might have today and say, look, I'd like to really, codify and refine our agreement. What's our exit strategy? They might take that the wrong way. I think, at least that's how I'd come into it. I'd be wondering, are they wondering if I want to exit?
mm.
And that's my motivation for doing that. If you were talking to me as an agency owner with this trepidation, what advice would you have? How would you suggest I go about approaching my partner and say, hey, we need to sit down and talk about what our long-term plans and what exit might look like if either one of us want to leave?
I think exactly what you just said. I think that's what I would say. I'd say, even if you're 5 years, 10 years into your journey, and things haven't gone wrong, they're still going well, and but actually what you're doing is you're I guess you're preempting that challenge, and there's nothing worse than sort of trying to solve it when you have got a problem. It's better to prepare for that in advance. So saying what you just said, say, look, I'm just being mindful of at some point we're going to want to, one of us is going to want to leave, or we're both going to want to sell the business. What is the mechanism for us to do that? Why don't we actually think about that, and maybe set out those terms, because ultimately a shareholder agreement is really the understanding of how they're going to run the business and exit it, and what terms. So I think it's very helpful to do that. And you may want to bring in a third party, whether that's a non-exec or a mentor, business coach, or maybe your accountant or lawyers might be able to facilitate some of those conversations as well. But I think it's definitely being prepared for for any eventuality, and I think it's just sensible business practice to be prepared for one day this is going to, it's not like a marriage that it's not till death us do part, like a marriage, hopefully. But I mean, some agencies unfortunately do end up that way. But I think in most cases, I think the agencies that I work with would like to have a payday one day that helps them towards another chapter, or towards a more comfortable retirement. So I think we're looking at the same parallel with marriage. But yes, I don't think it should be something you should be embarrassed about raising as a question. I think it's just sensible, and maybe they just use use an excuse like this podcast to say, I heard about someone advising it, or maybe somebody they read in a book, or saw it on the telly that somebody said, we should do these things. Well, it doesn't matter what the inspiration is for you to have the conversation. I just think it's a sensible thing to do at some point, well in advance, hopefully, of them saying, I want to sell, which is unfortunately the way I did it. And I just said, I had this 10th anniversary of my agency, which coincided with my 40th birthday. And those two anniversaries just hit me so suddenly that I kind of just said, I think I want to sell. And in hindsight, I didn't prepare that. I didn't prepare that conversation in advance. I didn't sow any seeds that this might be a good idea one day, even though I'd done the shareholder agreement, 5 years before. So even though, that part of it had been prepared and there was an exit, well, there was kind of like, how does one exit? We agreed all those terms in advance, but yeah, still, I think you do still want to be prepared, as best you can. You don't know when these things are going to happen, and what the catalyst is for these conversations. But I think it's that particular conversation about where are we going with the business, and how or what mechanism do we value our shares on, who who and how can we sell our shares is a conversation worth having well in advance of you needing it.
You heard it here, folks. This is great advice. Just share this podcast with your partners and let them listen to it and let them come to some of their own conclusions. And then you can have a great conversation. Folks, we're talking with Karl Heasman about how to handle these complex and potential challenging systems when you've got multiple agency partners in play. And I've got a bunch more questions for Karl that you aren't going to want to miss. But first, are you aware of the extensive reporting we have available inside of Agorapulse to help you easily demonstrate your success to your clients?
I actually can't say enough great things about the reporting with Agorapulse. I feel like that is my job security every month. My clients aren't that active on social media, which is why they have me manage their profiles for them. And when they get that report, it verifies that they're making a good investment.
The metrics downloads are so simple and easy to read, and it really helps me show where we are doing things right on social and where we need to improve.
So I think one of the main reasons why we decided to move to Agorapulse is because it's a more comprehensive, integrated tool for all of our marketing needs. So rather than what we have had to do historically with Sprout, which is use certain parts of that platform that work really well and then supplement it with other outside tools, by moving to Agorapulse, we were able to keep all of that into one technology platform, which is not only a time saver, but it also makes sure that our analytics and all of our reporting's on point because we're pulling all from the same source.
It's a really great platform for agencies. It makes it really easy to manage, but gives me really, really, really robust information that actually helps me develop better strategies for my clients and better plans of action.
So, Karl, what's typically the first step in your experience when you've got two or more agency executives who aren't aligned?
My first step, good question. I guess in most cases, I've known them for a while before. So this is something that will come along during our journey together. Saying that, I did have one agency come to me and said, pretty openly, or one of the partners, 4 partners, one of the partners said, we are dysfunctional. Can you come and help us become less dysfunctional? Which was interesting. But in terms of what would I do as a first step, I think the first step is to get them to understand where they want to take the business. So it would be going through a planning journey. And what I tend to do with them at the early stages of getting together with agencies is to get them to think about where they want to take their agency, and ultimately kind of do some blue sky thinking about where do they want to take that business, and what point would they like to be proud of it in a way that they would like to sell it. What does it need to look like in order to get to a point where they want to sell? So they kind of I get them to share their longer term view of what business they want to create. That tends to create an interesting dialogue, and it also is the first, I guess, trigger for them to see whether or not they want to take the business in the same direction. If they've got another conflict that's brewing, then I would try to create a sort of a safe space where I get them to sort of share their issues and be honest and open with feedback. So be about facilitating that conversation to say what are the things that are annoying or getting in the way of taking the business forward, because one of the parties is doing something the other one isn't in agreement with. So it's really about creating that safe space, that conversation, that dialogue, where you are able to uncover the elephant in the room, because a lot of these conflicts are brewing under the surface when I start working with agencies, but they just were never brave enough to raise them because they needed a third party to help facilitate that awkward conversation. So I guess it's really it's about me helping them to uncover those issues and the conversations that needed to be had, and then creating that sort of safe space where they can listen to each other without judging, and really ultimately listening to each other's opinions, because you often don't have that without a facilitator, without a mediator. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to identify that what needs to be discussed as soon as possible is the destination,
Mm.
Right. And again, I'm enjoying this relationship and this marriage analogy so much because it's like when you're dating with your prospective spouse, if you two don't talk about whether or not you want children,
Yeah. Yeah.
that could potentially be a huge issue down the line. You don't want to be 5 years into the marriage and
Yeah.
have one person, ready to have children and the other one never want to have children.
Mm.
That's going to be a potentially
Yeah.
calamitous
It's a
issue.
deal breaker. It's a deal breaker, isn't it? Yeah. And
Yeah.
just like a marriage, there's other stages in that relationship that you come across changes yeah, in your desires, in your needs, in your ambitions. Like when the kids leave home, that leads to a different sort of relationship where you sort of look at each other across the dinner table and wonder if just the two of you is enough, or whether you're coming to retirement and you think, I want one of you wants to go and live on a beach somewhere, and the other one wants to move into the city. So there's going to be, like marriages, business partners, agency partners, and owners change. They change their ambitions over time and their needs. Yes, some of them have a burning ambition to set up another business, or an itch that they haven't scratched and they really need it. And I personally knew I had another chapter after my agency. I just knew it was so being an agency owner is so busy, and it's you're absolutely totally immersed in everything, and like I'm sure agency owners out there listening will be will understand the same thing. You don't feel like you've got enough bandwidth or enough time to think about your next chapter. I just knew I had one. I just didn't know. I just didn't have time to think about it, and in a way, I kind of jumped at the chance to sort of sell just quicker than as quickly as I could, because I needed to do something different. But of course, business partners, like marriage partners, they need a bit of time to get used to these things. If one person wants to do something different, you've got to either take them on the journey with you, or give them an option to sort of take a slightly different path. And I think in my situation, I was kind of like, all I knew was like, I just want to do something different soon, and relatively soon. And on reflection, I probably wasn't very very fair to my business partner, who was thinking, my goodness, where are you going? I want to take the business to another level. And I'm like, well, I'm ready to get off now. This is great. I've done my bit. I've done my 10 years so far, and I got so I was ready to go. And it took me 18 months after that to sort of prepare for my exit. But I think you're right. Yeah, it's an interesting parallel, isn't it, between business and
Yeah.
marriage.
There's some core truths about humanity here that I think we're kind of talking around. One is that we change over
Mm.
time. Our goals, aspirations, our abilities, our interests are way different now than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago. I can certainly personally attest to that. And the other thing that I think is really, really important that you touched on just a moment ago is that you need to talk to your partners and allow them time to think through what it is that you're talking about doing that is different. And the tension there is because as humans, once we make a decision to change,
Mm.
we want to change as rapidly as we possibly can, right? If you're thinking about all of a sudden getting a new car and you've decided, yeah, I'm going to get a new car, you can't buy it fast enough. Now suddenly the old car is just no good anymore, and you're just intuitively aware of every single thing that's wrong with it. I'm obviously minimizing this, but just as an example, that's how we are as human beings. And so that's something we need to be mindful of as agency owners and partners. We need to be mindful of our partners and be thinking about, all right, if I do think I may want to start to work towards an exit, these are conversations I owe my partner to have with them.
Yeah.
Right. So is that some of the kind of next steps or advanced steps? What else would you recommend? And is at this the point that they really need to bring in somebody like you? How are you going to help them facilitate these kinds of conversations and activities?
Yeah, well, I think that is if one of the partners has that intention to exit at some point, and that's clearly not the intention of the other partner or partners, then yes, it's absolutely a good idea to have that conversation as early as possible, and maybe absolutely bring somebody in like myself to facilitate those conversations, so that there can be a seamless exit rather than a conflict where one person the other partner feels, I guess, rejected or not part of the journey, and it can be very much dealt with in a really mature, kind of sensible, calm way. But it is difficult when you're on the receiving end of that. So imagine if you're on the receiving end of your partner saying, "I want to leave you." That's, you can see with that's going to create a lot of angst, and it might not be very welcome. So I think if you have somebody, a third party that doesn't have any individual partners' interests, so they're independent, then I think it's a very sensible thing to do, and you can start to develop an action plan with timelines of how to get there. And that might be also, how to get over or how to improve your relationship. It I guess the analogy there would be a bit of marriage guidance counselling. You can have a facilitator that would help guide some of those conversations so that you can express your ambitions in a safe place where your partners will listen to what you want and hopefully help you get to that goal. Because at the end of the day, it might well be beneficial for the other partner or two or three to continue with the business, and not go for an exit at the same time. It doesn't mean because you own a business together that you both have to, or all the partners have to sell at the same time. I mean, I think that's also something that a lot of agency owners don't think about. They just think we either go together or we don't go together. Well, that's not necessarily the case. One or two partners could leave the business, and the business can continue quite nicely without them. And it's all about trying to get the partners to understand what their ambitions are, and try to get them to explain them as clearly as possible to their other partners, so that they can help them. Everyone can get where they want to go on their agency journey.
And folks, if you're listening to this and you're having some deep thoughts, maybe some uncomfortable thoughts, and you're realizing these are going to be some uncomfortable conversations, we'll have links to reach out to Karl and talk to him about how he can potentially help you with that in the show notes. But Karl, I've got just one more question for you. I'm wondering if you can leave us with any kind of best practices or advice that you can share with agencies who've got one or more partners, whether they're going through challenges or they're just everything's going great. What advice would you share for them?
Well, I think the top line advice would be to make sure that you understand where you want to take the business, and that is understood and agreed and aligned with the other agency owners, so that everyone is on the same page, going in the same direction towards the same goal. I think that's the fundamental, best practice piece of advice I would give. Now, in order to get there, I would also recommend that you sat down and created your annual goals. You maybe ideally have a 3-year plan, have your annual goals, which you agree on, and then set your quarterly goals, and then have monthly actions, which ideally will be agreed and shared at a board meeting of some sort, whether you host that yourselves or get a third party to share that. I think that's really a really great way to always keep in touch with everybody's sort of bigger picture, where we're going with the business. I know a lot of agencies do kind of an annual away day potential, or 2 days where they go and do a strategy sessions. That's also a really helpful time to discuss where you want to take the business, and is anybody looking to do anything different or has any other ambitions along the way. I think that's something that I would definitely do. If you do have a challenge or a conflict that isn't being dealt with, then I would recommend that you kind of nipped it in the bud as quickly as possible, because they tend not to get better on their own, unfortunately. So talking is probably the best solution there. So try to have those conversations, those awkward conversations, and if you don't think you can have them on your own, then absolutely bring a third party in that you feel that could give an independent view and help facilitate that conversation in a calm way. I think that's also key. You can also do some other exercises like you could do some active listening training. There's other kind of workshops and mediation and coaching that you could do if you have got an issue, a challenge that would help. And there's other examples or exercises like the Johari window exercise, for example, which is a visual framework that helps you understand your conscious and unconscious biases, and you can ask each other what you think they are, and that's quite an interesting way to understand the different personality traits of your colleagues, and sort of and in a safe environment share what you think those biases are, and that you can get a deeper understanding of each other, and that can help to sort of uncover some challenges or give you an opportunity to express how they're coming across to you or to the other members of the team, which may be the cause of that conflict. But yeah, I think regular meetings and regular feedback, sharing goals is the key to that.
Fantastic. I think we're just scratching the surface here. So I know folks are going to want to learn more. Where can they go if they want to reach out to you individually and learn more about these kinds of topics and how you might be able to help them?
The best place to get me, Mike, is probably on LinkedIn. I think there's only 2 Karl Heasmans on LinkedIn, so I think that'll be quite easy to find. Hopefully, I think that's definitely the best place to get hold of me. And just send me a message, and I'm always willing to help and have a chat with an agency owner, whether that's on your side of the pond or mine.
Terrific. Thank you, Karl. I think this has been a really important conversation. For those of you listening, if this has really resonated with you, I would love it if you ran over to Apple and dropped us a review and let you know what you thought. Let me know what you thought of this particular episode. Value your feedback. I'd love to hear from you. That's all we've got for today. Until next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, hosted by Mike Alton and powered by AgoraPulse, the #1 rated social media management solution, which you can learn more about at agorapulse.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and be sure to leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.